Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Leap. It's always such a deep honor and my pleasure to be able to bring these incredible stories to you each week that I really do help you around your own healing journey as you are moving through grief and loss. And today I have a very special person that I am deeply honored to interview. My guest today is Donna Lathrop. And I just ask all of you, just get your tissues out. This is not going to be an easy story to hear. It is, however, one of remarkable resilience and transformation. I bring today Donna, who lost her two sons in an accident at the same time. And I would love, Donna, for you to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Well, I'm Donna. What can I say? I'm a mother and a housewife and a grandmother.
So let's jump right in. I want to just preface this story by saying that Donna and her husband, Larry, who was the principal of Falmouth High School here in Maine at the time when they lost their boys, and I was a sophomore in high school the next town over. So everybody in the surrounding area knew about this double tragedy that was beyond comprehension. But Donna and I actually didn't meet until 3 years ago. And so, again, I am so grateful that you are willing to share this story because I know that so many people have been touched by this story over the years. And I'm really hoping that people listening will understand just how resilient they are with their own loss. So let's begin with your story. Bring your boys alive for us. Can you talk to us about Mark and Kevin?
Well, I'm sure all mothers say this, but my kids were terrific. And I worked in the school system in the town where I work and live now. But the people I worked with, they couldn't get their teenage kids to do anything with them. And they were always going in different directions and they could never get them to do family things. Our boys loved to do stuff with us. They went camping with us. They'd rather do that than go off with their friends. I mean, we were a close family. They were great kids.
And so let's see, Mark was 17. He was a senior in high school.
Yes.
And Kevin was 15. He was a sophomore.
Yes.
Can you talk to us about the day that your kids had this tragic accident?
Well, I was working at school in North Yarmouth, and they were at school in Falmouth, and they had a dental appointment. They grabbed the car from their father and went to the dentist after school, and they had their teeth cleaned and they had no cavities, so they celebrated by going across the street and getting an ice cream and heading back to school to pick up their dad. They had to go across a very dangerous railroad crossing. People had been killed there before, and I will add that we sued the railroad to change the crossing. And while we were in litigation, a couple drove across and were hit also, and the man survived, but his wife didn't. So it was a dangerous crossing. You can't see the lights. You're not allowed to blow the train whistle at that crossing because the neighbors don't like it. And it was a bright sunny day, so it blocked out the flashing lights, and you come at it at such an angle that you can't see. And the shrubbery and everything was so tall, you couldn't see the train coming. So anyway, they were hit by the train, and we lost both our children.
And even though it's been 42 years, even to hear you say it is, I think it is so beyond anybody's actual comprehension. It's beyond people's comprehension to lose a child. These were your only two children.
Yes.
You lost all of your children in this.
Exactly. And I was no longer a mother.
You were a mother, but you weren't a mother to living boys.
That hurt. And the house was so empty. In fact, I will tell you that, well, we were told by a number of people who knew what they were talking about that our marriage would not survive this. But we had an incredible support system with a very close family, close church family, an incredible pastor. I mean, he was at our house for weeks, every single day, just to check on us and make sure we were okay. My husband and I both had incredible support systems where we work. In fact, my teachers took turns coming home from school with me every single day and staying with me until Larry got home. They wouldn't leave me alone. So we had incredible support. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't have made it.
Before we go into how your marriage survived this kind of atrocity that happened in your lives, you shared something with me the other day that I haven't been able to stop thinking about. The day that lots of people, when they lose people they love, actually can lose their faith for a while, sometimes never find their way back because their anger is just so intense and so palpable.
Right.
But you shared something different with me the other day. Can you share that with us now?
I was not a believer. I didn't say there wasn't a God. I didn't know if there was or wasn't. I just was neutral on the subject. I was okay. You could believe what you wanted. I wasn't sure. But our pastor drove us to the hospital after the accident. And after we lost them both, we were driving home, and there was such an incredible spirit of a peace and calm. And I don't know, it's kind of hard to describe, but we felt it in that car driving home. All three of us felt it, and we talked about it. And we said, there is a spirit with us here in this car. We knew it. And I can't put a tangible thing. I can't describe exactly, but we just felt it. And God's been in my life ever since.
And when you say that you could feel it, I mean, I understand that when something is so not of this world, it's hard to put language to something that isn't physical. You can't see it. You can't touch it.
Right.
When you say that you could feel it, and it was, did you say it out loud? Like,
oh yeah, we talked about it, the three of us. Oh my gosh, there's a spirit here with us right now. And the pastor agreed. He felt it. And it was almost like the air in the car was different. It was just such, I don't know, I can't describe it, but the spirit was there. No doubt in my mind.
And so instead of being somebody who lost their faith, that could have happened so easily after, like people say, God took my kids, right? But you found
He gave me faith. But God didn't take them. God doesn't do that. It happened. It happened. It wasn't his fault. He didn't do it. But he has my children, but he gave me faith.
Talk to us what happened after you lost your boys. You've said so far that your pastor was there for you. You had dear friends that were looking after you. Yes. You've been on this journey now for 42 years.
Yes.
And you told me the other day that it took a solid 10.
For me to forgive the railroad. Yes.
Okay. So let's talk about what happened in those early years, because you've got a profound story to share that happened after that first year. And so I would love for you just to talk to us.
I guess this is the reason that I agreed. I'm a very private person, but I agreed to do this for you because people who have suffered need to know that there is hope, that there's a new life if you just will recognize and accept it. There is hope. Life isn't over. I mean, my husband and I, we never blamed each other, and we had to stay healthy for each other, because if we were gone, then the other would have nobody. And so we kept plugging together. We held tight to each other. And in fact, we decided that we were going to start our lives all over again. And so we renewed our marriage vows, and we went on a honeymoon. And when we came back, we started proceedings to adopt a child. Well, we set out to adopt 2 children. We decided to pick a girl and a boy, so it would be different from what we'd had, so we wouldn't be comparing. There were just nothing out there except 17, 18-year-old boys. And I said, I want time to bond. That's too old.
Just before you go on though, Donna, how long after the accident when you lost your children did you do this renewal of your vows and decide to start your life over and start looking at adoption?
We lost the boys in March and we renewed our vows that Christmas.
Okay, 9 months. Okay. And then you decided at that point that you wanted to start looking into adoption?
We decided probably earlier than that we would start our lives together over again. We'd start fresh. And so then we planned ahead to renew our vows and try to adopt. So we'd build a new family. We felt too old at age 41 and 43 to go back to the baby stage. Yet we were too young to spend the rest of our lives without children. That was just not thinkable. And so we decided that we would need to adopt.
Okay, so tell us what happened. You started looking. They were older children. They were 17, 18-year-olds. They were boys. You did tell me that you really wanted a boy and a girl so that you weren't as apt to maybe compare the brothers, right? Having the two boys.
Right. And it just was nothing. And the social worker, she kept telling me, I've got this 13-year-old boy you really need to meet. And I go, no, he's too old. I'd rather start like at 8 or 9 so we have more time to bond. And she kept pounding me. The next time we'd meet her, you have to meet this boy. He's too old. I really like a little younger. Well, finally, she kept pounding me. And finally, I said, okay, I'll meet him. So we walked into the room, came through the kitchen, and he was sitting on the couch in the living room. And I walked through that doorway, got one look at him, and I said, he's mine. He's mine. And he is 53 years old now. Yeah, wonderful son.
Before you tell us about your son, because there's so many questions I have for you, you told me a story about where this young boy came from and the abuse that he had endured.
He came from an upper middle class family and he was abused. He was not accepted because he wet his pants when he was a baby. He had a flaw in his character. I mean, anyway, even though it was upper middle class, it was not a healthy environment. And the father was involved too, but it was mostly the birth mother. And she would send him to school with sandwiches that were so salty that you couldn't eat them. And he was found eating out of the garbage every day at school. So his school nurse got involved. And that's how he got reported to the state and ended up in foster care.
And then the parents wanted him back.
Yes.
When the two of you had decided to adopt him.
Yes. And they found out where he was and they proceeded to hound us. They showed up on our doorstep one day and said they wanted their son back. They would show up, the birth father would show up in my husband's office probably once a week and sit there for an hour or two just haranguing him that he wanted his son back. And we had to end up going to court. We got approved. His adoption was approved and they filed to revoke it. And so we had to go back to court and they called our son into the judge's office and he was to tell them about his life with his birth parents. And he told them and the judge didn't believe him. And so he called his social worker in, and in his file was a letter that his birth father had written him saying that he could have friends, he could go on family vacations, he wouldn't get locked in his room anymore, and he could have his furniture back in his room. And so the adoption went through.
And so talk to us, how did you, I just think about this. I mean, just first of all, I have to backtrack because I think it is beyond remarkable that you, of course, I know you and Larry now, and I just think that you've got the most beautiful love story of any couple I've ever known. And I look at the two of you now together and you still have this amazing, remarkable love. And I think what I get so blown away by is that here you are in the deepest grief of your life, losing these two beautiful sons of yours. It's a year later, you've adopted another child.
We didn't adopt him until 2 years later.
Okay, 2 years later.
Yep.
Still, it's like a blink of an eye after what you went
Yes.
through.
Yeah.
Tell me, can you share with us, how did you and Larry do this unimaginable grief around the loss of your sons? You're raising this child now who's 13 or 15 now, right? By the time you actually get him, because he was 13 when you met him.
No, he was just turned 13, and he was still 13 when we adopted him.
Okay. So what was that experience like of
It was tough. Yeah. It was tough. He was an abused child. He didn't know how to behave. He didn't understand how love works. He didn't, and he had anger. He had so much anger. And we'd try to play games with him, and he'd growl and he'd wrestle and he'd pound the wall. And he was just trying to push our buttons all the time.
And I have to ask, you know, I'm a therapist, but I'm trying to imagine these dynamics. Like, were there moments when you're like, what the hell have we done? And was it such a distraction that it helped with the grief that you were going through with the boys? Like, talk to, I mean, it just feels so complex to me what the two of you tried to undertake at this impossibly, I can't even put words to what I'm thinking.
Well, there's a higher power there that was helping too. I'm convinced. But yeah, it wasn't easy. And like every day when he was coming home from school, I'd say, okay, you're not going to let him get to you today. He tried to push my buttons because he blamed his birth mother for everything. So he would come home from school and try to push my buttons, try to aggravate me, and I'd say, okay, today he's not going to get to me. Well, he always did. So I'd send him, okay, up to your room, go. And he'd go. And then he'd come down about 5 minutes later and everything was hunky-dory. He was sweet as pie, and I didn't beat him. I didn't do anything to him. I just sent him to his room, and that was the penalty. He came with nothing because he had nothing but the clothes on his back. He had no toys, no nothing. He didn't have a baseball, nothing, because they took everything away from him when he was bad. He had no furniture in his room. He had no toys. He had nothing. It had all one by one been taken away. So that first Christmas, we had bought everything that he needed, a baseball glove, toys that normal kids 13 have. And so there was a pile of stuff under the tree for him, and he got obnoxious. And finally, a couple days before our Christmas, I said, you're being so awful lately. What's come over you? What's going on? And he said, well, I'm being bad, so you'll take away my presents.
Oh my gosh. It's going to make me cry.
And he just knew it was going to happen. So get it over with. Get him out of here. And so I said, I don't care what you do or how bad you are. Those are not going anywhere. Those are yours. Well, then he was fine from then on.
Was that the turning point for him?
No, that was the first Christmas. But I think that's when he got it, that he wasn't going to be abused. In fact, he was bad one day. I call it bad. He was being obnoxious one day, and right after the adoption was legal, and I said, golly, you're being obnoxious today. And he said, yeah, but you can't get rid of me now. I'm adopted. And how he ever got the security that we weren't going to give him away like garbage like his birth parents had, how he had that security that we weren't going to get rid of him, I have no idea. But he said, I can be as bad as I want. You're not going to get rid of me because I'm already adopted.
It's called love. Yeah. Do you remember when he talked about the spirit in the car and the day that your children died? It's like,
yeah,
he could feel that. That child could feel something that he knew that no matter what, he was at his forever home. It's going to make him so emotional.
I mean, his new room was always neat as a pin. He kept everything neat. And then right after the adoption, it was a mess. It was a total mess all the time, like normal teenager. And that was one of the things I said, what is going on? I don't have to do it anymore. I'm adopted. So yay, he knew we loved him.
So going back to my original question,
Sure.
around the grief of your boys while trying to raise this son who really challenged you. What did it look like? Like, what did it look like for the two of you? Were you talking about it in the evening? Were you like, what was going on?
When we go to bed at night, we'd sit and talk about what a challenge he was, but how much we loved him. And he could be and is a very lovable person. He just needed time to grow and find out who he was. I mean, that first, I don't remember when, but that first year we had him, I had a chair and a half that I always sat in, and he would come and sit in the chair with me and take my hand and put my fingers in his mouth. And the social worker said, that's his way of bonding to a mother image. And he did that so many times, just trying to be part of us, I guess.
It gives
So
me the image of a pacifier almost, you
Yeah,
know, only it was
yeah.
a part of you.
Yes.
No human being can replace the boys that you lost.
No.
Do you
But
feel like in some ways, the only word that comes to mind is saved you somehow?
oh gosh, yes, we've told him that. We've told our friends. I mean, we saved him, but he saved us.
Yeah.
He saved us. I couldn't imagine the rest of our lives without children or grandchildren. It was just, but we felt we were too old to really start totally over. So, anyway,
So when did things start to turn a corner with him?
probably when he went away to college.
So high school was a challenge, all the high school years, would you say?
Yes. Yes. And we didn't have as much money as a lot of the kids that he went to school with or what his birth family had. And he was always a challenge because he wanted things that we didn't think was right or couldn't afford. And his friends had their own car. And why couldn't he have a car? And well, we didn't believe in it in the first place. But, you know, that was a challenge. That was a challenge. And he wanted to go to this Ivy League college, which we couldn't afford. And he accepted it begrudgingly. And then he had a great 4 years at Orono. He went there for a weekend. He was not going to go to UM0. And he went there for a weekend and had such a good time. When he came home, he said, I'm going to Orono. So, yeah, and he had a great time there, a good education, and he's been very successful. He's given us 4 great grandsons. I still have no girls in my life.
I guess it just wasn't meant to be.
I wanted a boy and a girl myself. I got 2 boys. I wanted to adopt a boy and a girl. I got 1 boy. I said, well, at least I'll have a granddaughter. No, I have 4 grandsons. I love them, but I didn't get a girl. And I guess God, he knew, I guess, that I was better with boys. I don't know. Girls weren't meant for me, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you know, I have 4 brothers, so I always wanted a sister. I want to go back to the first year after the tragedy of your sons. And I want to know, and I'm sure listeners want to know this too. I'm sure everybody is sitting there as stunned as I am. Like, how did this couple lose their children, adopt this child that was challenging? They were able to save their marriage. Like for most of us, any one of those things is overwhelming in and of itself. You had tremendous faith. You had a very strong support system, but I am still stunned by this story. And I want to know from your perspective, how did you and Larry survive that first year? How?
We loved each other. That's all. We loved each other. And God helped us. I swear, God helped us. I don't know if this fits into the story at all, but Larry and I went to high school together, didn't like each other, but just knew, oh yeah, I think he's a senior and I'm a junior. Didn't like each other at all. He went off to college, and after college, he was dating a friend of mine, which I didn't know. She was dating a Larry, and it could have been anybody. and he wanted to go to a weekend at college before he went in the Air Force. She didn't like to dance, so she wouldn't go for the weekend. And I kept telling her, go with a guy. Dance is only one small portion of a whole weekend. And my other girlfriend says to Larry, you should ask Donna Roberts. No, she'll never go with me. And I said, I had told her that this other girl was crazy for not going. So Larry says, you ask her. If she says yes, I'll call her. So I said, sure, I'll go. It's a great weekend. Why wouldn't I go? So he called me. Now, you can drive from our hometown to Waterville in a little over an hour. Before we got to Waterville, we both knew something was different. This was something different. We'd been on dates before, but something was there. And looking back on it now, I think God had intervened the whole time there. So anyway, we dated for 3 weeks, and then he went in the Air Force. He went into pilot training. He flew home for the weekend, and he arrived the day we got married. So we dated for 3 weeks, and we've been married for 61 years.
Okay, so wait a second. This is a big deal because I think this speaks to the resilience and the strength that you had as a couple. But what happened to your girlfriend was dating him? She didn't care that.
Oh, she said, well, if I'd known that was going to happen. Well, anyway, we're not friends anymore, I will say. Anyway, but yeah, I think it speaks to the strength of our love for each other, that it happened that strong, that quickly. We've been through a lot together and held it together. He was in the Air Force and spent 4 years in Vietnam while I was in Japan. He'd get home for a week and then back in Vietnam for 4 to 6 weeks. That was a tough time, but we held it together. And we still very close. We love each other. We tell each other we love you all the time. We hug all the time. We're close. What can I say? I think that and God and our support system got us through.
Such a beautiful story.
I just, when you go through something, there is hope. Life changes, but it's what you make it. Life will be different, but different isn't bad. I lost 2 of my boys, but if I hadn't lost those 2, I wouldn't have the son that I have now or the grandsons that I have now. And there's an old saying of some sort, I don't know, I won't get it right, but out of every bad, some good will come. You just have to look for the good. And you can find it all the time if you'll look.
I have another question. Did losing your sons change the way that you saw the world? And what I mean by that, like this next son that you raised, were you more fearful? Were you more protective? Were you more like, you know what I'm asking, right?
Yeah. Yes and no. We lost 2 boys in an accident, but we also had a child who had been locked in his bedroom most of his life. So he had no life experiences. He'd done nothing. And so we had to let him go and experience life. You just pray, please keep him safe. Please keep him safe. And he was a good kid. You would expect him to be more troublesome than he was, going out and raising hell, but he didn't. And he went out with his friends. He didn't have a car and couldn't drive until he was a senior. He couldn't drive because I wouldn't let him. And we did that with our other boys too. They couldn't drive till they were a senior. No need of it. Anyway, old fashioned. So he'd go out with his friends and we'd wait up for him. And he'd come up the stairs and sit on the end of our bed and talk for an hour. It was so wonderful, but we kept saying, oh, please go to bed. It was a joy. Yeah, he was a good kid. He's a great son and a wonderful father, which is another thing. The psychologist said he will not form a permanent relationship with a woman, and abused children don't normally make good fathers or parents. He's a wonderful father.
You're such wonderful people, and it's unfortunate that all of our listeners won't be able to like experience the energy that you and Larry give off, because I love being around the two of you. And I just think about the power of love and how you are a testament to that. Just everything from your marriage to this boy that you raised that was abused, who he has become as a father and a man. And you know me, I believe that spirits live on. I feel like my brother is around me. I want to know, your sons have given you so many gifts, it seems to me, since their death. And I guess I just want to hear from you in this deep, deep life trauma that you and your husband have experienced. What do you feel like the greatest gift is? That this sounds very, I know how twisted this sounds when I say the gifts that we get from grief, but they are there. They do come if we allow them. Yes. My question is, I know that your son is your greatest gift. What else do you feel like you and Larry have learned or have been given?
I've been given my faith. I lost my boys that day, but I gained my faith.
What does that mean?
I don't know. It's just, I know God is there with me. I know he's there. That's such comfort and support. And maybe I can describe it this way. I had some surgery one day and I was scared to death. And I was shaking and I was just scared. And I said, okay, God, walk with me. I can't do this alone. I'm scared. Take this from me. And when it was my time, I got up and I walked into surgery as calm as a cucumber. I knew he was walking with me.
Like I said, I think it's been the most stunning thing I've learned about you through this story, because I can't count the times I have talked to people or counseled people in my work who lost their faith the day of their darkest tragedy. And so I think that's what's most remarkable to me about your story.
Well, the spirit was in that car that day and there was no denying it. And since he came to me, he's there forever. And now I can see where he has put his mark on my life over and over and over again. There are things that have happened that shouldn't have, that, wow, somebody else had a hand in that. Even the way that we got together, even the way that Larry and I came together as a couple. Who would have thunk? Somebody else had a hand in it.
What if people don't have faith, Donna? You know?
I don't know. I don't know how you get through something like this if you don't have your faith or a support system. I guess if it hadn't been for my faith, our support system, our close family, our church family. We went to church because I wanted my boys to be able to choose for themselves whether they were believers or not. And so we took them to church and they were in youth group and actually they were in confirmation class. And so we had that church family that supported us, that we could count on. And we go to church every Sunday and cry all through church, and they let us cry and they'd hug us after and be there. And if you don't have a support system, I don't know how you make it. And then the people that we worked with, both of us, the people that we worked with surrounded us with love. See, there's the key, love. Love conquers all. And if you don't let love in, wherever it's from, I guess, then maybe you don't make it. I don't know how you survive without it, but you have to let people in.
Yeah. I have nothing to add to that.
I will say, I know my boys are okay. We went to a medium one time. We had read a couple of her books and we went to a medium and we were sitting in the audience and she was walking through the audience, speaking to people who had had losses and were grieving. And as she came back down the aisle, she stopped beside my husband and me and she said, "You people are grieving. You're all grieving, I know, but you have not suffered like these people have suffered." And she turned to us and she said, "Your boys are fine." First of all, how'd you know we had lost? I suppose because everybody there was grieving. But she said, "Your boys," plural. So she knew. I don't know. So I have that joy that I know my boys are okay. And also what has meant more to me than I can say, my boys, my three men, my husband and my two boys always lined up at the door every morning before they went off to school. for me to say goodbye and kiss them each goodbye. And the boys stood there. These are 17 and 15-year-old boys. They stood at the door waiting for me to kiss them goodbye every morning. And when we lost them, I kissed them goodbye that day. I kissed them goodbye, and that means the world to me that I was able to kiss them goodbye. And since then, realizing how important that is, my husband and I don't go across the street to the corner store anywhere without kissing goodbye, because you never know. You never know. So love each other and be sure to kiss goodbye. Always.
I can't speak. I think this is the most beautiful way to end this interview. And I've said this numerous times. I also feel that way before you get off a phone call, before, always to say, I love you, because it matters to those of us who survive, because no matter what, you will always go to the last moment that you had with those that you loved.
Yes, absolutely.
Is there anything else you want to say to our listeners before we end?
No, just don't give up. Have hope. There is hope. Just don't give up. You have to be willing to work at it. And don't forget love.
Donna, thank you so much.
Thank you. Susan, hugs.
Hugs. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in. I hope that Donna's story really does infuse all of you with a sense of hope, because if they could survive what they survived and thrived and raise this remarkable human being, then you can get through whatever you're going through too.
Amen.
So bye for now, and we'll see you all here next week. Bye. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening. If you enjoyed this episode of Leap, please subscribe, share it with others, or leave a rating and review so others can benefit from this content. Be sure to check out the show notes for resources related to this episode. And to catch all the latest from me, you can follow me on Instagram at susan.casey. If you have a transformational story to share on grief and loss, please email me at leapwithsusan@gmail.com. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.